This is TWIS, This Week in Science, episode number 1047, recorded on Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. Let's pretend with some science. I'm Blair Basderich, and today we're going to fill your head with YouTube, sea lions, and pretend play. But first,
thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. When is a show not a show? And when is a podcast not a podcast? When is TWIS not TWIS? And when is science not science? One thing's for sure, even though it's just me tonight, there's still a show, a podcast, where we will discuss science, and I look forward to doing that with all of you on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, everyone out there. I'm Blair Basderich. This is This Week in Science, and we are just getting started here with this week's episode of This Week in Science. Thank you for joining us. We have a great show ahead. It is just me tonight. We are without all of our other co-hosts, so you're going to be stuck squarely in Blair's Animal Corner tonight. I've got stories about sea lions. I have stories about YouTube. I have stories about Alan. It's back. And then also some pretend play. As we jump into the show here, I want to remind you that subscribing to TWIS on your favorite podcast platform is a great way to let us know you're out there, to spread the word about This Week in Science, and to support us. You can do that on your favorite podcast platform. Like I said, you can also do it on YouTube or Facebook. And we promise we will bring you TWIS every time a new episode is published if you subscribe. So you'll get alerted when those drop. Just search for This Week in Science or visit twis.org and select your delivery method of choice. But now it's time for me to let you know about the science. Now, it's been a little bit since I did one of these on my own. Generally, those of you who are watching along live, you can pop in the chat. I have YouTube, I have Twitch, I have Facebook, and I have Discord open. So go ahead and let me know if you have anything to chime in, if you have questions, and I'll try to monitor the chat as best I can. Otherwise, I'm just going to run through my stories. I'm going to let you know what my take on them is and what I think is interesting about them. And hopefully that'll give you a cool little insight into some things going on in the world of science this week. So before we get fully into the animal corner, I have a couple stories that are kind of generally about ecology or environmental concerns or human impacts before we get into the nitty gritty of the animals. The first one is about Alan. So Alan, or artificial light at night, there have actually been a lot of studies about these recently. And I don't know why, but Alan is just a really interesting subject to me. I think because it is the epitome of industrialization and humans living in a space. But I think that because it's more passive, it's less active of an impact on a space. I think a lot of people don't think about the impact of artificial light on animals and environments. So you could understand how putting a road through a habitat might be a problem. You could understand how removing food sources by overhunting or weeding or whatever it is could impact an animal. You could even understand potentially how noise pollution could impact animals, like especially singing birds, for example. But a lot of people don't think about the impact of light. And so artificial light at night, or Alan, has an impact on animals in a big way because it impacts their circadian rhythms. They're expecting it to be dark. They have adaptations related to light and dark, and particularly nocturnal animals have a lot of adaptations related to it being dark out. So if you add in artificial light, it impacts where they want to go, it impacts how they act, and it impacts the way that they interact with each other. There's lots and lots of things that are impacted by Alan. And we even talked recently about how it might impact pollination patterns. So there's all sorts of crazy things that can happen. But this study that I brought from Newcastle University was looking at what time of day Alan has the most impact. And historically, mitigation strategies or ways that people would try to reduce the impact of Alan on animals and ecosystems would be to dim lights after midnight or switching off lamps during low traffic hours. They usually focus on late night. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One being that the assumption is if it's impacting nocturnal animals, the time when that impact is going to be greatest is at their peak awake time, right? Middle of the night. But ultimately, probably the reason that those are the mitigation strategies that have been used to this point is that it has the least impact on humans. Nobody's using the lights at midnight anyway. Low traffic, don't need to see. So that's how a lot of it has been up to this point. But this study is actually looking at twilight hours. And there is a disproportionate impact of Alan during twilight. It's impacting navigation cues. It's impacting kind of when animals get up and how active they are at what time. And so twilight is impacted more than other times of night. And also as a reminder, there are animals that are crepuscular that are only active at dawn and dusk. So they're obviously going to be disproportionately impacted by Alan at that time because they're asleep during the day and in the middle of the night. And so they found that small reductions in brightness during twilight actually had a bigger impact on conservation than the midnight bit. And the interesting thing about that is that LED technologies are better than they ever have been before, more widespread, cheaper. And so that allows people to kind of impact the specific intensity, the way that the lights turn on and off, the spectrum of light, and the direction that the light goes in, the emission direction. All of those things are way more controllable than when we were working on gas lamps or incandescents or fluorescence. So the LEDs allow for a lot of opportunity for, one of the first things I thought of was they have the seasonal affective disorder lamps, the like happy lamps that are supposed to look like, make you feel like the sun is rising in your house. And it turns on very slowly and kind of just slowly fades up. And it would be great if streetlights and other Allen sources could fade on extremely slowly, almost slower than the sun goes down, so that you had a little bit of a darkness period before it got too bright. Also considering emission direction, so you don't have unnecessary light flashing into areas that are not needing to be illuminated for safety. And then also the spectrum of light. Are there specific spectrums that are more or less impactful on migrating animals, on invertebrates, on any animal that might be impacted by Alan? And so ultimately, the authors call for greater collaboration among ecologists, lighting engineers, road safety experts, and national and local authorities. I would like to remind everyone that we did not always have electricity, but we also did not always have the sheer concentration of people in cities that we now have, not to mention very fast moving cars. And so you do have to balance the public safety element with the conservation concern. I am never going to say that we should trade human safety for conservation impact. So the question is, can you have a larger impact on conservation of urbanized species by reducing artificial light in the twilight hours without making allowances for human safety. And so this, this is a huge potential for future research, trial and error, working with local agencies, but you also have to get the buy-in of people. So, for example, San Francisco, where I'm from, there was a proposition on the ballot many years ago where they wanted to make sections of Golden Gate Park completely dark, like darker than they are now, at night. And it was particularly the soccer fields. They basically wanted to say nobody can use the soccer fields at night so that wild animals could have the protections that they need in the park. And it was a really tough conversation because on one side, you have a recreational use of a space in a city where there might not be other safe places for particularly young people to recreate at night. This isn't them at midnight. This is them at like 6 p.m. in the winter, right? Or do you prioritize the fact that Golden Gate Park is a wildlife corridor and also home to many, many, many animals, again, in an urbanized area where there's not a lot of safe places for them to be? So it is a really hard conversation. It is a difficult debate and ultimately difficult to say what the right choice is. Are there other places that those young people can go to play soccer? Is that the most important place to keep? I think that was the other kind of tough piece. It was the easiest thing logistically to protect and to turn the lights off on, but it might not be the most valuable space because it was actually very close to the Great Highway, to the road. So is that kind of like this? Is it the equivalent of turning the lights off at midnight? It's not really helping anybody. So there's not an easy answer to this. Ultimately, like electricity got better, areas got more populated, and so light just got more and more and more at night, and now we're just really starting to see the implications and trying to go, oh gosh, maybe everything shouldn't be quite so well lit. So yeah. Yeah, they're hard conversations. It's very complex. And there's no clear answer. Like, I'm not suggesting that all the lights go out and everybody wear headlamps in the city. But cars have headlights and they're able to drive on like backcountry roads, right? So are there certain roads that you could illuminate less? Are there certain roads that need to be illuminated more because, for example, there's more pedestrians? Do we need streetlights at every pedestrian crossing? Probably, right? So, yeah, it's really difficult to figure out exactly how this works. And then, there's security lights. So that's the other thing, is a lot of a lot of city or local governments will want to have certain areas to be well lit to protect resources, places, reduce crime, all that stuff. So then that's a whole nother piece. It's really tough. There's not a clear solution, but artificial light at night continues to be a concern, and it is going to be a hot topic of conservation for sure. Oh yeah, and Fada says we have indoor football fields in Portland, footy fields. Yes, soccer. But they also keep the park lights on too. Yeah, so that's really tough. And until there's enough scientific study to look at specific corridors, specific parks, specific times of day, specific species, it's going to be really difficult to figure out where to focus efforts in kind of making legislation or regulation where the artificial light at night is altered. Okay, so next, I have another kind of conservation-minded story. This is about YouTube. So raise your hand if you've watched a cute animal on YouTube. I certainly have. I can see through the internet. A bunch of you are raising your hands. So YouTube is a fun place to go for animal videos. I don't know if it's a good place to go for conservation information. And so that's what this University of Michigan story is looking at. Specifically, they wanted to look at YouTube comments and saw how many of them were focused on conservation efforts. So it's not even the YouTube content, how conservation minded was it? It was how conservation minded were the individual videos. Animal videos are very, very popular on YouTube. It's usually zoos, safaris, baby animals eating strange and unusual pets being silly, right? And so there's a lot of opportunities to engage with animal content on YouTube, but there's not much nuanced conversation about conservation, which, like, I could tell you, duh. And so they're saying that this is identifying a huge potential to be better at conservation messaging on YouTube. So how did they do this study? And then we can kind of get into the implication a little bit more. There's a huge data set in YouTube. They found about 4,000 videos classified as wildlife. Then they trimmed the list by more than half by selecting videos that featured at least one English language comment. And so they only wanted to look at videos that had comments. That included mostly footage from zoos, safaris, and also hunting. Then they categorized the comments by attitudes they expressed. They found 5 different categories for the comments. Expressions of appreciation and concern for wildlife and humans made up 4 of the categories. And then the 5th was calls to action. That was kind of what they were looking for, ways for people to engage with conservation. With that, they created what they call a gold set of comment attitudes from 2,778 comments assigned by hand. So they use this to then train a machine learning model. So they created their set so that they categorized these 2,700 some comments, and then they could hand that to the machine learning model to say, this is how to categorize comments. And then the machine learning model, it assessed about 20,000 additional comments. One of the biggest challenges with training the learning model, though, was that there were so few conservation comments that it was hard to train the model how to spot them. So if the label you're looking for has less than everything else, it is really hard to train the model to find it correctly. But they're confident that they did, and they found that about 2% of comments featured a call to action to help conservation efforts. So they essentially are saying this is a huge opportunity. This is a huge area of kind of potential to engage people on YouTube with conservation conversations. Now, I am not sure. And having spent 20 years in conservation education, I can tell you 2 things. One, there is always an opportunity to talk about conservation. So they're right there. These researchers are dead on there in that there is always an opportunity. But I don't know if it's the responsibility of the commenters to do that. And I think that's a really strange way to set up this study, because ultimately that's like teaching a class and expecting the students to tell the other students the learning objectives. It feels wrong. It feels like the content of the video itself should be sparking that conversation. And if it isn't, then that is the fault of the creator, not the commenters. So I don't know if they're trying to say that these comments are indicative of the content or not, but my experience with internet comments is that they are generally hit or miss, right? The other thing about internet comments is I feel like they're similar to reviews. You get really good and you get really bad. You don't get a lot in between. I will say, except for live comments, because you are here all chatting with me right now. That's a little bit different. But I'm saying if somebody posts a 3-minute video and people comment on it later, it's most likely going to be your extremes, right? And so that being said, you're going to get people saying, oh my gosh, it's so cute. I want one as a pet. And you're going to get people saying, this is fake. But you're not going to get people saying, it's so interesting that you shared a video of the slow loris. It is endangered and lives in the rainforest. Like, you're not getting that in a comment section. So I think that's tough. I also think that not every media outlet can do everything. And I think that's a huge failing when people are figuring out how to communicate with people over the internet. There are different platforms for a reason. The content on TikTok is different from the content on Instagram, is different from the content on YouTube, is different from the content in a long form streaming show. And so all of that to say, they have different objectives and they have different success criteria. And with YouTube videos, I'm not convinced that the number one objective of a wildlife video on YouTube is going to be to spark conservation conversation. I think ultimately TikTok, Instagram, just social media in general, including YouTube, their main goal is to spark curiosity. And if they're doing that, they are encouraging people to learn more. They are encouraging people to tune into that David Attenborough Planet Earth hour special about the rainforest, where they're going to get that really heavy duty information. And so I think that to say there's only 2% of comments that are about conservation is misleading, because you don't know who in those comments learned about an animal they didn't know about before, that's kind of inspired them to go on to do something else, to learn something else, to go to a zoo and talk to a volunteer, a staff member there. So you're not really seeing the whole story, because, you know, I've said this before on the show and I will say it again, like, learning is a spectrum and you don't know where people are on that spectrum. People who are receptive to conservation information might not be searching for cute videos on YouTube. They might be looking elsewhere. But people who are looking for cute animal videos on YouTube might know nothing about those animals. They might learn what a marsupial is, that a marsupial has a pouch. They might learn that sloths have moss growing on their fur. They might learn that most lizards can lose their tail and grow them back, right? Like, so you don't know where they are on that learning spectrum. And so you can't see the rest of their journey. And so when I worked at the aquarium and at the zoo, I would tell my staff, who are educators, all the time, because you don't know where they are on that spectrum, you gave them something that day. And you might have taught them that giraffes don't lay eggs, which is something that we talked about all the time with guests, because we would have ostrich eggs on display in front of the giraffe barn, and people put 2 and 2 together and thought that giraffes laid eggs. And they would go up and they would say, oh my goodness, is that a giraffe egg? You would go, oh, well, actually giraffes are mammals, ostriches are birds, ostriches lay hard eggs, giraffes have live young. Did you know that when a giraffe gives birth, they're 6 feet tall and they drop down to the ground, and that initial impact on the ground helps shock their lungs into taking their first breath, and da 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 da, right? So that time they learned that giraffes don't lay eggs. The next time they might learn that the giraffes live in the African savanna. The next time they might learn that giraffes are endangered. And then the next time they might learn what they can do to help giraffes, right? So like, you're not there for every single conversation that they have, but you might have helped them along their path. And so I'm just trying to say that all these people engaging with this YouTube content, you don't know where they went on to the next day and what they engaged with the next day and what they found out the next day and, all that kind of stuff. And I just generally, it has not been my experience that people are commenting on YouTube videos with conservation goals. I just haven't seen it. And I don't think that doesn't mean they're not talking about it. Like, you don't know if they go at the dinner table that night and say, I saw this really cool video. Did you know that giraffes live in the African savanna and there's all these different kinds of giraffes and you can tell by their different marking, right? So like, I just think it's a very interesting snapshot. And I see you, Fada. I see that you're saying, isn't this what you do, Blair, every week on YouTube, Twitch, and all the other TWIS social media? You start discussions about interesting animal science facts. Yes. What percentage of social media do you think my account is? Do you think it's representative of more than 2%? Probably not, right? And that's my point, is that somebody might find me as their very first touch point to animals. If you did, welcome. I can't wait to share everything with you. But I think it's much more likely that they saw the baby tiger on Good Morning America, or they saw the video of somebody bottle feeding an elephant, and then they started looking for other things and they stumbled across kind of that heavier content. So I think that I just want to call attention to the fact that I don't think this is a failing. I think that the way that people engage with media on the internet is different. It's not a conversation exactly. It's a one-way conversation. You put a comment in there, someone might comment on it to you today, tomorrow, next year, but you're not in a room talking together, learning together, right? It is different. And so I'm just saying that I believe you can get something beneficial out of a YouTube video without overtly stating, I heard that if you buy a hybrid car, you could reduce carbon emissions, which are going to reduce impacts on oceans, which will make sea lions have a better time foraging for food, right? So like, I don't expect to see that on the internet. That doesn't mean it's not happening, is ultimately my point. And so also, if somebody scrubbed through these comments, would they think they're conservation comments? How does this machine learning model do that? Are they commenting on conservation language in the video? Does that count as a conservation comment or not? So I just think that there needs to be a realistic expectation about how people engage with internet content. And instead of saying that we need to be including more conservation messaging or we need to encourage more conservation content in the comments, use the tool as it exists to your advantage. Use the cute animal video to push traffic to a website that will teach them about something, or to a long form streaming show that will teach them about something, right? So like, I just think that there's an unrealistic expectation. But that being said, if any of you are watching animal videos and you want to post some comments about what people can do to save them, have at it. Apparently we could use more of it. So there you go. That's my, not even 2 cents, $2 at this point. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to move into the animal corner proper. We were adjacent, but now I have 2 stories about animals and some science related to their behavior. So without further ado, it's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner. What you got, Blair?
Can I hear you all say it? What you got, Blair? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. First, I wanted to tell you about some sea lions. So I'm used to California sea lions here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Most sea lions and seals give birth to their pups around the same time each year. There's a very specific breeding season and pupping season. They wean them, they send them on their way within about a year. It's an annual cycle. But Australian sea lions have an 18-month breeding cycle. It is out of sync with the seasons, so it kind of bops back and forth. And it's puzzled scientists for years. It would appear that Australian sea lion mothers spend an extra 6 months with their pups. Why? Well, in a recent study, researchers captured footage of an Australian sea lion mother taking her 11-month-old pup on an 8-hour foraging trip to the sea. So 11-month-old pup is like practically a teenager in sea lion terms. They're pretty big. But they went on an 8-hour foraging trip in the sea, and it looks like we have some direct evidence that the mothers are passing on foraging skills to their pups. And so this might be part of the reason that they spend so much extra time with their mothers. They might have this very specific learning time. Basically, they're going to school with mom to learn how to forage and hunt. And so this success, this kind of not even head start, but just additional training, I guess, that these pups get, has over evolutionary time, it has completely shaped the reproductive patterns of these animals. They attached an underwater camera, a GPS tracker, and a dive recorder to an 8-year-old sea lion mother. And then a few days later, when the mother returned to the colony, they collected the device, they downloaded the data, and they looked at the camera recording, and they got some amazing footage of the mother and pup diving at sea together and foraging across different habitats. That included sponge gardens, kelp reefs, and large sandy plains. They even got some footage of the mother capturing a giant cuttlefish and taking it to the surface to devour, with the pup close by throughout the entire thing. This does look like Australian sea lion mothers use social learning to pass on foraging skills to their pups, and it demonstrates how to locate, capture, and consume prey. I do wish I had access to the video. I was kind of banking on Kiki doing her amazing pull-up of videos, as she sometimes can do, but I can definitely share some pictures. Here we go. So you can see the camera is on the mother. So in all 4 of these images where you see a sea lion, that's the pup, and he is following his mom, and he's checking her out, and he's going, "Where are you going next? What's next, mom?" And so he's staying pretty close, and he was able to see the whole process of hunting for food. It's pretty cool. There's all sorts of funny comments about how this is the first time we've seen XYZ. I mean, there's lots of mothers and fathers and grandmothers in the animal kingdom that do a lot of kind of social learning, that demonstrate things to their babies. And this is just the latest one. I think it's pretty cool, especially thinking about how a mother might signal to her pup underwater how to, stay with me, don't go over there, watch this. I think it's fascinating. Other animals that we've even talked about on the show that do similar behavior, bottlenose dolphins, they're actually the ones that show their calves how to use sponges. I don't know if any of you remember that we found out there was kind of a cultural difference between different subsects of dolphins. Some were sponge users and some weren't. Well, the sponge users were learning it from their mothers. Orcas and sea otters inherit dietary preference from their mothers, most likely because they watched them eat and forage or hunt. And so in this particular instance, the researchers believe that this particular social learning behavior of this extra 6 months of learning time is critical to their raising their young, and that it really is a make or break for survival for these guys. So sea lions, they're Their social learning is a really important part of their development. And so that also, of course, has implications for conservation, like the specific areas of water, how long certain seal beaches should be protected, and, general marine mammal protections around, how old or how kind of developed marine mammals should be before they can be disturbed, if at all, and also impacts on potential food sources. Like if they're trying to learn how to hunt and there's nothing to eat, then they're not going to be able to learn. So most animal parents do not teach their young skills. The word most is really difficult, but I would say yeah. It depends how you're measuring, right? Like if you look at the whole of invertebrates in the animal kingdom, most of them don't teach their young how to do anything. Most invertebrates, especially marine invertebrates, a lot of them are broadcast spawners. They never even see their kids. A lot of invertebrates lay eggs and leave. That's true for a lot of reptiles as well, a lot of amphibians. And so I would say the majority of animals, parents do not teach their young any skills. They kind of have to figure it out on their own. So it's cool when we see that because it's familiar. All right, and then my very last story for tonight is about apes who play pretend. So this study in particular is from Johns Hopkins University. And it's one bonobo, so sample size of one, going through a series of Tea Party-like tests and seeing a lot of pretend play. So if I can skip to the actual methods section here, I think that's really fun to kind of jump into how this worked. So this was with Kanzi, a 43-year-old bonobo. He had been anecdotally reported to be engaging in pretense and could respond to verbal prompts by pointing. And so they created what looked like a child's tea party. An experimenter and Kanzi faced each other, tea party style, across the table. There were empty pitchers and cups or bowls and jars. In the first task, there were 2 transparent cups on the table. Both of them were empty, and an empty transparent pitcher. Should be very familiar tea party stuff. The experimenter tipped the pitcher to pour some pretend juice into the cup, and then they pretended to dump the juice out of one cup, shaking it a bit to really get it out. Then they asked Kanzi, "Where's the juice?" And he pointed to the correct cup that still, quote unquote, contained juice most of the time, even when the experimenter changed the location of the cup. Then they wanted to see how he would act if he couldn't see it. So there was a cup of real juice and then a cup of pretend juice. When Kanzi was asked what he wanted, he pointed towards the real juice. So he seemed to understand. A third experiment, they used grapes. An experimenter pretended to sample a grape from an empty container. Then they placed it inside one of the 2 jars. They pretended to empty one of the containers and asked Kanzi, "Where's the grape?" He again indicated the location of the pretend object. And so essentially they're all flipping their lids saying like, "Oh my God, animals can pretend." So they're saying that they think there's a capacity to understand pretend objects for likely back to 6 to 9 million years to common evolutionary ancestors. Imagination is usually categorized as a human trait, but they're saying, oh, this might not be exclusive to just humans. And so the thing that I just kind of posit to everyone listening, and I would like to see if I can chat to Kiki about this in the future too, but Is imagination and play different? And how can you know what's going on in an animal's head? Because a lot of animals engage in play, particularly when they're young. And if you think about like roughhousing, if you think about chasing each other, if you think about engaging with toys, what of that is pretend play? I know I've seen apes in zoos, but also in wildlife videos playing with leaves, scooping nothing with a leaf, poking things with a stick. Like, is that a pretend tool? Is that a pretend treat? Like, we don't know, right? Like, we don't know what's going on in their brain. And so, when they're chasing each other, are they pretending that one animal is predator and one animal is prey? When dogs roughhouse, are they pretending that they're fighting, but they're not really? When I play tug of war with my dog, are they pretending that we're fighting over a kill, right? Like, I don't know. And I don't have an answer to that, but I think that once again, this is an issue with perspective taking. And because apes can interact with human objects that have human significance, and they can interact it in the way that we interact with it, we can look at it and go, they are pretending, because that bonobo wanted to drink out of a pretend cup with pretend water in it, right? But if we changed the target so it wasn't a human object and a human act, would we still consider it pretend? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe I'm stretching things too far. Maybe this is really truly groundbreaking and amazing and different, and it needs more study. We need to look at it more. We need to test this more. We need to find ways to test this in other animals. And I think that's my point, is this has opened the door to an opportunity to research this with lots of different animals, but you have to come up with a reasonable test and a reasonable measure for pretend. And that's much harder to do with animals that don't have opposable thumbs and cannot relate socially to us the same way that apes can. So, yeah, imagination in apes, it's real. I would not be surprised if imagination in other animals is real. I mean, we know that animals dream, for example. Like, my dog chases things in her sleep and makes cute little sounds and moves her legs. She also will sometimes lick the air in her sleep, like she's eating something. So if they can dream, I don't think it's a huge leap to pretend. So I would love to learn more about this. I would love to hear more research. I would love to find a test design that somebody's figured out where they can test this in other animals that aren't apes. But also just more apes would be good. This is, again, a sample size of one. This is a single ape. So a single bonobo. Let's see if we can find some more bonobos, some chimps, some gorillas, heck, maybe some siamangs. And then we can expand it past that. Wouldn't that be nice? All right. Well, that's all the science that I brought tonight. I'm checking the comments to see if anyone has any questions or comments about this story, but I'm just seeing a lot of emojis, which is good. You're all finding it interesting. I love that. Well, with that, that is all of the science I brought tonight. My voice is hanging on, so I think we will leave it there. My final comments. I had a great time talking to you about all this stuff today. I do miss Kiki. I look forward to seeing her next week. We miss Justin, of course. He's a hardworking man out there. Hopefully he'll be able to join us again sometime soon. And so with all that, I appreciate all of you engaging with me tonight and hopefully laughing, learning, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Shout outs to Fada for his help with social media and show notes, Gord for manning our chat room, Identity4 for recording the show, Rachel for all of the editing and other assistance that you give us. And I'd also like to thank our Patreon sponsors for their generous support.
Thank you to Aaron Anathema, Adam Mishkan, Alan Viola, Ali Coffin, Andrew Swanson, Artem, Arthur Kepler, Bob Calder, Bob Coles, Brendan Minish, Brian Carrington, Chris Wozniak, Christopher Dreyer, Christopher Rappin, Craig Landon, Craig Potts, Daryl Myshak, Steve Wilkinson, David E. Youngblood, Don Mundus, Donovan Styles, aka Don Stylo, EO, Eden Mundell, Eric Knapp, Flying Out, Fredis 104, G. Britton Ladder George Chorus, Greg Briggs, Jack Jason Olds, John Atwood, John McKee, John Ratnaswamy, John Gridley, Ken Hayes, Kenton Northcote, Kevin Parachan, Kevin Breeden, Kurt Larson, Lon Makes, Lauren Gifford, Barry Gertz, Marjorie, Mark Hessenplo, Mark Jenkins, Noodles, Patrick Becker-Raro, Paul D. Disney, Paul Ronovich, Philip Shane, Pierre Velazar, Richard Batch, Robert Norland, Robert Farley, Rodney Lewis, Rudy Garcia, Remy Day, Sean Clarence Lab, Shu, Bruce, Stephen Albrion, Steve Leisman, aka Zima, Sue Doster, Teresa Smith, Tony Steele, Vegard, Chef's Dad. Woo-hoo. Thank you so much for your support on Patreon.
Thank you for your support. If you're interested in supporting us on Patreon and getting your name read, you can find that information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience, or you can go to twis.org and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show, we will be back live at 8 p.m. Pacific time, and on Wednesday, and Kiki should be back as well. We hope that you will join us on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere in between. If you want to listen to us as a podcast, perhaps while you set up the tea party that you're going to have with your favorite pretender, just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well. For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to our stories will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. Was that the right number of W's? You guys know. It's 2026. You know how many W's are on the internet. And you can also sign up for a newsletter that will probably come out at some point. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, or a suggestion for an interview, let us know on one of our social media accounts, or better yet, send us an email. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into a cuttlefish that is eaten by a sea lion. We look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And if you've learned anything from the show, remember, it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.